Hello, and welcome to the end of the Battle of Calth. I am Zeckthar, and this week we will be discussing the aftermath of the Battle of Calth. Ironically, we actually finished the battle last week, but I figured you would like to see what the outcome was. What with Roboute Gulliman trying to get vengeance on the word bearers. Well, let's get into it. For those of you who didn't listen to the first vlogs, I will give you a quick briefing. But if you want to hear the full story, listen to the last vlogs. The Battle of Calth, Part 1. The Ultramarines were betrayed by Lorgar and the word bearers on Calth, their fleet and soldiers decimated, and only because of the reinforcements coming from Ultramar did Roboute win a Pyrrhic victory. Yet the Primarch from Ultramar wanted more. He wanted vengeance. In his wrath, the Lord of Ultramar gathered what vessels he could spare, and drew additional numbers from the 1st Ultramarines relief fleet, bound for Calth after the massacre above that world, and tracked Lorgar directly through the use of the 13th Legion's own astropathic choirs. In the wake of the Battle of Calth, the Word Bearers Legions, led by Lorgar, linked up with Angron and his World Eaters Legion to launch a shadow crusade against the realm of Ultramar's 500 worlds. This was an attempt to spread the massive warp storm known as the Rune Storm that had been conjured by the Word Bearers' first chaplain, Erebus, at Calth, which spread across the eastern fringe. This Rune Storm would effectively split the galaxy in half and deny needed reinforcements to the Loyalists as Horus drove on Terra in an attempt to overthrow the Emperor of Mankind. The Shadow Crusade laid waste to 26 worlds until Gulliman's Retribution fleet finally caught up to the traitors upon Angron's homeworld of Nuceria, where they found Angron's legion exterminating the planet. You see, this is Angron's home planet. He had always hated the way they had treated him. Revenge would not be swift. He wanted to take his time and pour out his hatred and pain to the curs that held the planet. The 13th Legion's warship, Courage Above All, Gilliman's temporary flagship, broke warp at the system's edge at the head of a large void armada consisting of 41 vessels. While lethal, Gilliman's ships were a ragtag group who were quickly scrounged together to strike out against the enemy. It was not a well-planned armada, but one shuffled into existence due to necessity. The 13th Legion cruisers and the battleships ran abeam of the enemy fleet for a repeated exchange of broadsides, offering targets too big and powerful to ignore, while the rest of the Ultramarines fleet used calculated lance strikes from safer range. The armada then divided its assault potential, doing its utmost to destroy Lorgar's flagship, Fidelitas Lex, and attempting to take the World Eater's flagship, Conqueror, in a boarding action. But the Ultramarines' warships not only fought in space, no. They also attempted to take the fight to the surface of Nuceria, for this attack was personal. The Ultramarines had come for revenge against Lorgar and the Word Bearers. Several Ultramarine warships attempted to make a run on Nuceria, releasing drop pods, landers, and gunships, forcing planetfall by any means necessary. The Ultramarines' fleet swept over the planet like an insect horde. But the tenacious commander of the Conqueror, Lotara Sarin, put up a difficult fight and destroyed a number of the Ultramarine vessels that attempted to make a run for the surface. Though the World Eater's flagship transformed a number of the small vessels into flaming wreckage, the Ultramarines eventually punched through her tenacious defense and managed to land troops on the surface of Nuceria. Meanwhile, the Fidelitas Lex was already in ruin, its armor pitted and cracked, its shields a memory. The Ultramarines' armada attacked in strafing runs, trading fire with the superior warship and accepting their own casualties as the cost of bleeding the bigger vessel dry. Each assault left the Lex weaker, firing fewer and fewer turrets and cannons, taking punishment on its increasingly fragile armor. Yet, she fought on. The Lex lashed back with its remaining macro cannons, flashing in the lights of its own burning hull. Gilliman guided the battle from the command deck of the Courage Above All, and decided that the Lex would die first. killed by 1,000 cuts and swept from the board game, while the Conqueror would be boarded and killed from within. In the course of the Battle of the Nucerian Orbit, the Conqueror would not rise to its sister ship's defense. Both Traitor Legion's flagships fought alone, starved of support and suffering the endless attacks of the 13th Legion's armada. Salvation pods streamed from the Lex's side and underbelly, along with the heavier Mechanicum craft and bulk landers. This void battle was the form of dirty fighting between warships, too close for the neat calculation of ranged battery fire. Instead, it was an up-close and personal slugfest. The Ultramarines' battle barge, Armsman, intercepted the Conqueror and came abeam, launching assault carriers and boarding torpedoes. While the World Eater's flagship was busy repelling boarders, a number of smaller Ultramarine vessels slipped past her defenses and launched drop pods, gunships, and troop carriers. The first drop pods hammered home on the planet's surface. Sealed doors unlocked, and the first Ultramarines poured forth, bolters raised, moving in perfect and well-trained unity. But the World Eaters were waiting for them. Those not lost to the butcher's nails at once had a presence of mind to note that these Ultramarines were not the pristine cobalt blue warriors they had previously faced on the war world of Armatura. These legions of the 13th wore cracked power armor, still scarred and tarnished from some horrendous battle solar weeks or months before. These were the hardened veterans of the Calth Atrocity. Their eyes burned with cold intensity to carry out the vengeance in their hearts, and were intent on getting to grips with the word bearers. As was their way, the Ultramarines established footholds at defensible positions, clearing room for their reinforcements to land. For every position they held, another was overrun by the World Eaters in a storm of roaring axes, or lost the word bearers chanting implacable advance. The 13th Legion were crashed into by the 14th's ranks in rabid packs, showing why Imperial forces had feared to fight alongside the World Eaters for many decades. Uncontrolled, unbound, unrestrained, they butchered their way through the Ultramarine strongpoints, enslaved to the joy of battle because of the butcher's nails, cortical implants sandwiched between the meat of their minds. The word bearers also met their loyalist cousins with spite and hate. The Ultramarines returned it in kind, hungry for vengeance against the vile traitors who had defiled Calth and damaged its star. Word bearers units marched, droning black hymns and chanting sermons from the Book of Lorgar, bearing corpse-strewn icons of befouled metal and bleached bone upon their regiments. As the fighting raged, the burning shell of the Fidelitas Lex cut through the clouds into the planet's atmosphere, shuddering on its way east, rolling ever downward, and struck Nucerian's ocean surface far from shore. In the meantime, the demigod in gold and blue had finally found the object of his obsession amidst the clamor of war. Gulliman confronted Lorgar, possessing the advantage of two weapons, yet Lorgar's Crusades gave him a reach his brother lacked. When they first met, there was no furious trade of frantic blows, nor were there any melodramatic speeches of vengeance or honor avowed. The two Primarchs came together at once, power fist against war maul, and backed away from the resulting flare of repelling energy fields. Both Primarchs fought without heeding their warriors, their godlike movements an inconceivable blur to the Space Marines fighting around them. None had ever imagined the heroes of this new age would take to the field against each other, nor could they predicted the hateful spite between them. Gulliman struck out against Lorgar for what his legion had done across the 500 worlds of Ultramar. In his righteous anger, the Ultramarines Primarch struck Lorgar with one of his fists, battering the word-bearer's Primarch's sternum. Lorgar repulsed him with a projected burst of telekinesis, weak and wavering, but enough to send his brother staggering. His mace followed, its power field trailing lightning as Lorgar hammered it into the side of Gulliman's head with the force of a cannonball. The two brothers circled each other, now both wounded, yet eager for the kill. As the two Primarchs were locked in their furious life and death struggle, they were oblivious to the destruction being wrought around them. Suddenly, Angron burst forth from the Ultramarines' ranks, his armor a shattered wreck, and both of his chainswords spat gobbets of scarlet blood. The World Eater Primarch launched himself at Gulliman with murderous hatred. The two Primarchs fell into seamless, roaring duel where Lorgar and Gulliman had abandoned theirs. Gulliman was forced back by the storm of Angron's blows. As the two Primarchs fought, Gulliman landed a glancing strike, his fist pounding across Angron's plate. Yet one of the skulls of Angron's fallen kinsman that hung around the chain worn across his breastplate was partially shattered and scattered across the ground. Gulliman stepped back, and his boot crushed the skull's remnants to powder. Angron saw it and became enraged and threw himself at his brother, his howl of wrath defying mortals' origins, impossibly ripe in its anguish. The moment Gilliman's boot broke the skull, he felt the warp boil behind the veil. Lorgar started to chant in a language never before spoken by any living being. His words in faultless harmony with Angron's cry of torment. Lorgar enacted his dark plan to save his brother's life from eventual consumption by the butcher's nails, summoning the rune storm to the world of Nukuria, tearing the sky open and unleashing a crimson torrent formed from the ghosts of 100 murdered worlds, raining blood. Gilliman had been holding his own against the traitor Primarchs until Lorgar released his attack and started his aching, resonant chant. Angron, Roboute, still fought, with the Lord of the Ultramarines giving ground each time Angron landed a blow. Angron plunged his chain sword up under Gilliman's breastplate, a shallow stab, but a telling one. The Ultramarines Primarch crushed the impaling sword in one fist and staggered back, truly bleeding now. Despite the maelstrom of combat and sorcery raging around them, Angron still fought Gulliman, standing above the kneeling Ultramarine Primarch. He had not even noticed the storm of blood streaming from the sky in a red torrent. Sparks sprayed from Roboute's raised gauntlets as he struggled to ward off blow after blow. He was beaten and down. His wounds bled profusely, a palette of proud defeat. His warriors fought desperately to retrieve him. Fortunately, they were granted a brief reprieve as Lorgar's incantations locked up Angron's muscles and began to transform the Red Angel into a new form as the Demon Prince of Khorne. Gilliman took the opportunity to escape into his son's defiant phalanxes, retreating in inviolable unity. Lorgar saw the expression of disgusted awe on his brother's face as the wounded Ultramarine Primarch stared at Angron's metamorphosis atop the mound of dead sons from all three bloodlines of Space Marines. The 13th Legion continued to fire, even in retreat, leaving the world of Nukuria battered and bloody. Their campaign against the two traitor legions was over. For now. Roboute Gulliman escaped from Nukuria, unable to face or even fully comprehend what both of his brothers had become
through the corruption of the ruinous powers. The World Eaters completed their purge of Nukuria until not one human life remained on the benighted world. Angron, now the very embodiment of the blood god Khorne, shook the dust of the world from his feet and did not think of it again. Unfortunately, yet again, a Pyrrhic victory for Gulliman and his followers. They had decimated the two traitor legions. They could not land the finishing blow and eliminate the traitor Primarchs. It also ended the Shadow Crusade, ending both traitor Primarchs' crusade against the 500 worlds of Ultramar. Yet, what did Gulliman do after this? What was to come would be described by Gulliman himself as his worst blunder. The Rune Storm had done its task, splitting Ultramar and the eastern planets from Holy Terra. Thinking the Emperor lost, Gulliman formed up with his two loyalist brothers, Lion El'Jonson, Primarch of the Dark Angels, and Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels, and started his own empire. This was solely to hold control of the eastern province worlds, and then once control was restored, find a way around or through the Rune Storm. In the end, Gulliman succeeded. Barely. He was able to send Sanguinius through the storm in a desperate attempt to save the Emperor. It worked, and soon after, both the legions of Ultramar, as well as the Dark Angels, descend upon Holy Terra. Yet alas, the battle was over. Sanguinius had given the Emperor enough time to defeat Horus, yet fell to his corrupted brother in sacrifice that not just saved his father, but humanity itself. Gulliman arrived in Terra space too late to save his brother or his father. He wept for the loss, then slowly rose and took the helm of the Empire of Man. Yet that is a story for another time. I hope you liked this story. Feel free to follow, like, subscribe, and all that jargon. And don't worry, we'll have Vox for you next week about the trials of Lion El'Jonson. Until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.